Welcome back to Project Hardway. In this video, we're finally going to start putting my big block Chevy back together, starting with the camshaft and the crankshaft. Check it out. With the cam bearings installed, there is one more thing I want to do before I start assembling the bottom end. The deck surface here has got carbon buildup around the cylinders, and it's got some gasket material here and there. Also, the head bolt holes have got the previous bolts thread sealer on them. So I want to clean all that stuff up before we start putting everything together. That way I'm not trying to do it with everything in the engine, and I've got an opportunity to get everything cleaned up after I'm done. So I'm going to go through there. I'm going to use a medium Scotch pad to get after the deck surface, and then when I'm done, I'm going to use an old head bolt. You may be able to see there a little bit of shine on that one from where I already did the other side, but essentially I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on this, run it down through the threads, make sure everything's clear, nothing kinks up. That way the threads are clean whenever I get into torquing the heads on. So I'll just, not any kind of crazy pressure, just start in the middle, and you can already see some of that buildup coming off of it. Just kind of work my way around. I'm not trying to take any block material away, and this pad won't really do that. Just want to get it a little cleaner than it was. Took quite a bit of stuff, all the gunk off there. It's not perfect and completely clean like a machine shop would get it, but it's much better than it was, especially around the cylinder bores where you want that tight seal from the head gasket. Okay, so I've got just a little bit of oil and an oil bottle cap. This is actually used oil too. It's just there to give something in the hole while I run it through. So start with a hole, start hand thread. It's a little tight from the thread sealer that was on the old bolts. 5/8. Just slowly, gently run it down. If I feel it start to bind up or start to feel like it's getting hard to turn, too hard to turn, I don't want to force it because I don't want to strip those threads out. I'll back it out and start to run it back down again. I'll keep doing that until I can practically run the entire bolt down into that hole. That way I know that I've got all those threads clear. This one's extra gunky. Some will be worse than others. It just depends on how much sealer the previous engine builder put on it. Sometimes it's a good idea to, when you've done that a few times, go ahead and take the bolts out, clean the threads up on it. Too dirty. There we go. There we go. That's good. Backed it out. Wipe it off, and now this time I should be able to run it down in there. No issues. No resistance at all. No dead spots, no snags, just nice smooth threads. One down, 15 more to go. All right, there we have it. The holes there, you see shine on the threads. Everything looks pretty clear. So next step for me will be to get the air out and try to blow off as much of the loose debris as I can. Then I've got some towels that aren't going to leave any lint behind to wipe everything down, get it all cleaned up, and then the next thing we'll do, put the camshaft in. That is one sleeping dog and two sleeping dogs. So now that I've got my block cleaned up, everything's ready to start putting the engine back together. I've put some assembly lube on the cam bearings, and I want to put the cam bearings in without the rotating assembly because it's easier to get to those cam bearings and get the lube on them without that rotating assembly in the block. So we'll take a look at the camshaft. The camshaft that came in this car is the one that I'm going to put back in it. It's from a company called Reed Camshafts. This is the cam here. Ooh, yeah. This company unfortunately went out of business about 13, 14 years ago. It's hard to find specs and things like that. The only information I was able to find on the camshaft came from some snips of the manuals that were put on forums as I was just searching on the internet for it, trying to find out anything I could. It's the XS302 series. At 20 thousandths lift, it is a 302 duration cam. At 50 thousandths lift, it is a 252 duration cam. With the factory size big block Chevy 1.72 ratio rockers, it puts it at just over 560 thousandths lift on the cam. It's considered a camshaft that is a mild street cam. It's got aggressive duration, but it's got a mild lift that will be easier on valve train components. Though with the cylinder heads that I've got, these heads came with what I believe are probably comp valve springs. They're a double valve spring setup with a dampener. Given that it is a flat tappet cam, I'm still going to put some decent lube on the cam. Iski's Rev Lube with moly sulfide. All right, I'm going to glove up because this stuff is thick. I'll show you when I take the cap off, it just kind of, I'm just going to glob this stuff onto the lobes. The more the merrier. I think this stuff, you can get it on summitracing.com. I think it's about $25. Not too bad. A little bit, just a light coat on the bearing part. Got engine assembly lube on the bearings, but a little extra never hurt. What sets this apart from your basic engine assembly lube is that it's much thicker and it sticks to it. Like that engine assembly lube that I put on the cam bearings has already run down to the bottom of the bearing. With these cam lobes, you know, if I were to just use regular engine assembly lube, it would not really be effective, and in the time that it takes me to get everything put together on this engine and get it ready to fire up for the first time, it wouldn't even really be on the lobes anymore. It would have dripped down into the oil pan. This stuff is going to stay put and is going to provide lubrication for the cam lobes during the initial fire up until the oil starts really getting around in the engine and picks up from there. Now, when it comes to putting a camshaft in, there's special tools and things like that you can use to hold the camshaft steady and get it in there. I'm going to show you what I do. You probably do it this way too. I'm just going to cram it in there. Get past that first bearing. You gotta make sure your fuel pump rod is not falling down in the block. That might hold you up. Get out of there, you. All right, take two. It's still in the way. Yep, there we go. We're past that. We are on our way through the block. Now, as I slide this camshaft in, some of that lube that I slid on the cam bearing surface has already slid off of it. So it's a good thing I put it on there. That helps it slide it through, as well as getting it in through with the engine assembly lube that's already on the cam bearings themselves. Now, I don't have the plug in the back for where the camshaft goes, because I would have to take the engine block off of the engine stand to get that and put it in, which is only 4 bolts, but it requires me getting my engine hoist back out. I'm not doing that. So for now, we're just going to set the camshaft in place. I'm going to stick my hand back here so I can kind of guide everything in. Just use gloves. Put them on, no grease. And there you have it. The camshaft is in place. So, where do we go from here? It's crankshaft time. Now, before I can put the crankshaft in, I've got to put the new cam bearings in the motor. Uh-oh, got some of that rev lube on there. I'll have to wipe that off, but I've got everything else cleaned up. And you can see when the cam bearings came in, I got ahead of myself. I already put the one for the rear main cap in there. Just can't help myself sometimes. So wipe that out real quick. Give me that, come here. Now, when you put cam bearings in, you do not need to lube that. That needs to be dry on the block where the bearing sits in. These are the remaining main cap bearings that I've got to put in. They are from King Bearings, just like the rod bearings I'm going to use and the camshaft bearings that I did use. They've actually, I don't know if you can see that, but they've got them numbered inside the package. 3, 4. The ones that have got the groove and the oil hole in them, those are the ones that will go in on the block side. The cap side are just a flat bearing. So you see they've got this notch here. That will go in the block right there. There's only one way to put it in. You can't screw it up. So set it in place, push it down in there. Now you see when I first put it in there, it's not seated as it should be. You can give it a little push as long as your notches are lined up. You just want to make sure that that bearing is even with the surface of the block. I'll do that again for the other 3. Now, there's all the main bearings for the block side set in place. With the Mark IV big block, it is a 2-piece rear main seal, so you also have to put 1 piece of the rear main seal down in the block before you are ready to set everything in place. All right, there's one part of the rear main seal. Bearings are in place. Now before I plop the crankshaft in there, I'm gonna put some engine assembly lube on there. Got that Lucas. And I mean, you can never go wrong with how much engine assembly lube you use. You just glob it in there. Nice and lubed. Get a little crazy on number 5 here. Drizzle a little bit on the rear main seal. Smear that engine assembly lube around so that the surface of the bearing is coated all the way around the rear main seal there. All right, now I forgot how heavy this thing is. It's a big boy. Here we go. Slide it out. And there's only one way to really do this. You just got to be careful that you don't nick your bearings on the way in. Get her all lined up. Just set her down. Come to think of it, I probably should have put some engine assembly lube on the crank journals before I set it down, but I can go back and put some on the exposed part of the journal there, and it'll be just fine. And there it is. The crank is now sitting back in the block. All right, got the main caps all cleaned up, and I got the new bearings in them and the second half of the rear main seal. I've already put some Lucas assembly oil on it. So the main caps from the factory have a forging that say forward, and then I don't know if the factory put the stamp in there for the number 1 or if a previous engine builder did it, but all 5 main caps are properly stamped, so there's no screwing up how they go in and which direction they go in. So go ahead and slap those on there. For now, I'm just going to set them down. So I bought ARP fasteners for the main caps. It's not a boosted engine. It's not a crazy high horsepower engine. So I did not go with studs. I'm only doing the bolts on the mains and the heads. It should be just fine for what we got going on. So I'll open that up and I'll get those in place and we'll torque the crankshaft down and it'll be installed. I've got my main cap bolts snugged into place. These ARP bolts have got a groove on one side of the washer. You want to make sure that the completely flat part of the washer is down towards the surface of the main cap. Now, a stock big block Chevy, I believe it calls for 3 equal torque steps up to, I think, 94 foot-pounds. I could be wrong on that. You got to look at what the manufacturer of these bolts recommend when it comes to an aftermarket fastener. ARP tend to have a little bit different torque specs sometimes than what the manufacturer of the engine recommends. So for the Mark IV big block Chevrolet, ARP suggests 3 equal steps up to 100 foot-pounds for their fasteners. So I've got my torque wrench set to 33. We'll do 33, 66, and then 100 foot-pounds. The main thing to remember, not only with main bearings, but when it comes to stuff like intake manifolds, head gaskets especially, exhaust sometimes, anything that's spread out like this that you're having to put a certain amount of clamping force on, you always want to start when you're tightening it down from the center and work in either a crisscross or circular pattern to the outside. With those same types of things, when you take them apart, you want to start from the outside and work your way in. That'll help prevent warpage during disassembly. It also helps to spread the load out, especially on something like a cylinder head, by starting at the center and pressurizing things evenly as you go out. So I'm going to start with the number 3 main cap here. Another thing to remember is that with these torque wrenches, especially these clicker type, if you go too fast or if you snatch it, you could actually cause the tool to click off when it's not at a proper torque. So you always want to make sure that when you are torquing, you are applying even, consistent pressure and not snatching the tool around or going too fast or doing anything crazy. And right now I'm setting it to 33 foot-pounds. Going in a circular pattern from the inside out. And you see, I had all these bolts snug, but when I get to the last one, it's got a little bit more rotation to give on the fastener. It's because of the way that we're applying the torque to the crankshaft. Now 66 foot-pounds. And finally, 100 foot-pounds. I'm going to snug up against the block here because it's wanting to move around on me. Whoa. Come here, you. Now the main caps are torqued to spec, 100 foot-pounds for each cap, 3 equal steps. If it's done correctly, then it should still spin freely. There you see, crankshaft spins, nothing's hanging up, it feels nice and smooth. That means I'm ready to start putting the pistons in. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Check out my next video where I'm going to be putting new rings on the pistons, putting them in the engine, and finally assembling the short block, and possibly even getting the cylinder heads ready and putting those on the engine. In the meantime, remember, life isn't always easy. Sometimes you got to do things the hard way.